Well, I have to admit to being a little bit misguided in my judgment of Silverstone International. I didn't honestly see this track producing great racing. I thought that the Hangar Straight was going to put a little bit too much differential between the horsepower haves and the horsepower have-nots. My pessimism wasn't helped by the fact that Saturday's qualifying session was the first time the car had turned a wheel for about 5 months. It had literally just sat in the truck. I'd done no testing or track days leading up to this. But a highly strung machine this is not, and it came straight out the truck and did really well in quali. I was trying to break into the 1 minute 20s, which I did manage to achieve. 1 minute 20.2 placed me 5th on the grid. On a power circuit in the dry, that's a really good result for me. But the first race start wouldn't be without incident. Matthew Davis didn't get off the line in the XJR6, and he was stranded on the grid as the pre-83 field bore down on him. Stuart Kay was completely blindsided in the Capri, and I think Colin Claxton got caught up as well in the Dolomite Sprint. The result was 3 damaged cars, but luckily all drivers okay. It could have been much worse. The question probably should be asked of why the pre-83 field were allowed to start with a stationary car on the grid. Things soon turned spectacular when the wounded XJR6 went up in flames, a leaking fuel rail the likely cause. Fortunately, Matthew was alive to the problem and managed to get out the car quickly. He actually showed some really quick thinking in going for the Marshall's extinguisher pull. Not an opening weekend to remember for him, but if his reflexes are anything like that when he's racing, then he'll be one to watch. Of course, the race was red flagged while the Marshalls dealt with the problem, and credit where it's due, the response was superb. I've got no doubt that they saved the car in what was a rapidly escalating situation. The car is pretty beat up, but Matthew's in great hands at Swallows Racing, and I'm sure they'll put him right soon. On to the restart, and of course Sod's Law dictated that my getaway was pants compared to first time round. Mike Holt and Richard Coppock jumped me, and I ended up under pressure from Derek Pearce for the class lead, which was not where I wanted to be. My presuppositions about Silverstone were seemingly all confirmed when the first time round the Hangar Straight he absolutely flew past me in a straight line. Cue much internal monologuing about, well, this straight's too long, my car's shaped like a brick, it's not as fast as his and this is all futile, weh. But then I saw my chance to go back at him at Vale, so I absolutely launched it up his inside. It was fairly robust. And this is when I found out that I was wrong about Silverstone. Yeah, so I was having to pretty much park it down the Hangar Straight and hope, but I thought that I'd be absolutely cleared, and in fact the advantage was never that great that I couldn't defend. Even on the last lap, Derek damn near had the overlap on me, and I just had to clench my teeth and throw it into Stowe as hard as I could, and it worked. I wasn't the only man who was struggling to fend off an absolute dragster down the Hangar Straight, and actually my problems were pretty minor compared to what James Ram was dealing with. James has been absolutely imperious in the Jaguar Championship, but he had his hands full in this one. Tom Robinson was fighting away with him in the Swallows car. For anyone unfamiliar with the Swallows car, the way it works is that you hear a funny whining noise, you look in your mirrors to see where it's coming from, and by the time you've looked back up again, it's 100 yards down the road. It's rapid. This circuit really played into Tom Robinson's hands, though James made him work for it, and some of the fighting those two had was spectacular. They put on a real show at the head of the field. At the conclusion of race 1, Tom took the race win and Class D honours, and I managed to win Class B with a 4th place overall, which is not a result I expected from Silverstone. So on to the second race start, and although mine was reasonable, it was Lawrence Coppock who got it absolutely hooked up and hoiked himself past everyone bar James Ram. Tom Robinson had more horsepower than he did traction when it came to getting his car off the line, and I managed to throw one up his inside. James Ram was now looking fairly squeaky clean out front, followed by Lawrence Coppock and Tom Lenthal, and then myself. But I didn't have much chance of keeping the Swallows racing car behind me. Bear in mind, as you watch us pass down the Hangar Straight here, that every car in picture has got either a 4 litre straight 6 or a 6 litre V12, and none of them are slow, but that Swallows racing car is incredible. Getting past Lawrence Coppock's muscular V12 had been a bit of a formality for Tom Robinson, but it wasn't so easy for the rest of us. The great big V12 XJS doesn't quite stop or turn as well as the straight 6 engine cars, so Tom Lenthal was really stuck behind him, and I was nipping at Tom's heels. Something wasn't right, because normally Tom Lenthal would be up the road, he's rapid. These fun and games went on for a while, until Tom Lenthal finally found his way past the big V12. I succumbed to an excellent move from Mike Holt. Now Mike was attacking Kopok Senior, while I was defending from Kopok Junior. Richard Kopok's XJS had a bit more straight line speed than me, so again I was parking it on the hanger straight to take the inside of Stowe late on the brakes. It was working for me several laps in a row, until eventually I went too late on the brakes into Vale, threw it in with too much speed and got a monster tank slapper on that took me wide at club. Theatrics on the brakes at Vale were a bit of a running theme during this weekend. I put it down to watching Brit car testing on the Friday, watching the GT3 cars brake into Vale and thinking, I can do better than that. Most of the time, I couldn't. All of this was going on relatively untroubled for the class lead. Derek hadn't managed to get off the line and was having a pretty chaotic run back through the field. The threat for the Class B win was actually coming from Rick Walker, who was keeping me honest behind. Rick had some really good pace at Silverstone, which I sort of hadn't seen coming. I thought that Class B was going to be a 2-horse race this year, but if he keeps it up, Rick is going to be one to watch. It's just one component of what looks set to be a thrilling season for the Jags. The battle up top was brilliant. Tom Robinson took the double over James Ram, but this track couldn't have suited him better really, and it's going to be interesting to see where that goes later in the year when we go to twistier and tighter tracks. That's before you get the likes of Colin Philpott and Guy Connew involved, who will be returning soon after missing Silverstone. It's going to be awesome to watch. Speaking of which, my second race at Silverstone yielded some of the best Jag racing I've had. For me, it wasn't for class, but I still got stuck in with Richard Kopok and Mike Holt. We traded places more times than I care to mention. We were 3 wide at some points. It was awesome. Long may that continue. I finished the Jag races at Silverstone having had a perfect weekend, almost literally in terms of point scoring. Apart from a fastest lap point for the second race, which went the way of Derek Pearce, it was a maximum. Tom Robinson also scored a maximum, but he didn't have 4 starters in his class in the second race, which is required for maximum points. Which, I'm not going to make any assumptions because the Jag points are hideously convoluted, but I think it leaves me leading the championship. We'll see. I rounded out my weekend with a run out in the massive 32 car pre-93 and pre-03 mixed grid. This was a frenzied cataclysm of frantic touring car action, with all shapes and sizes getting involved. I had an old set of tyres stashed away in the truck, which I decided to strap to the Jag for this one. When I saw them, I wasn't expecting much. They were knackered. However, during quali, they sort of reanimated and gave me a surprising amount of grip. I did a 119.3, which is flying by the standards of my old bucket. During the races, however, when it came to leaning on them for lap after lap with no relent, they soon gave up. Things got pretty slidey, and it was good fun. I mostly spent my time tumbling down the order, but when you're going this sideways, having this much fun with this many cars around you to fight, it really doesn't matter. I finished the pre-93 races, nowhere in the order, but with a massive grin on my face. So that was Silverstone. It was a great success. My old XJ40 outdid itself at a circuit that was probably going to be its worst. Jags had their first outing with the Classic Touring Car Racing Club, and it was brilliant. Bart did us proud with the coverage, which is going to continue for the rest of the year, and I went sideways a lot. See you at Donington.